Hi. Today we're going to talk about the comparison between the films Lonely Are the Brave, I think from 1962, and First Blood, which was about John Rambo and became that big franchise, the fancy fables fiction film. Tall Tales and High Adventure. You're probably in the right place. If you're it's got a completely different setting. I then went on and read the book, and the book is very, very different. One is he goes ballistic in the book. He kills every single person he comes across. The movie did the complete opposite, where they intentionally didn't kill anybody. There's somebody that did get killed because inadvertently, but hey, that's how it went down. And that was intentional. They wanted to do that when they made the film. I just recently saw Lonely Are the Brave, and I don't know if there are any intentional copying going on from Lonely to First Blood, but scene after scene after scene, I'm like, this is exactly how it went in First Blood. And, I'd seen First Blood so many times that I just remember even the composition of things and the way this developed and just the mood of things. And scene after scene after scene, I'm like, this is exactly like First Blood. And I couldn't get out of my head watching the whole movie. So we started digging into it, and I read up on some of the comparisons of them. And I still can't determine whether or not they're specifically a copy, but they are so similar. You can't ignore it. The difference between these two stories is the one that they changed to end the original First Blood. So let's dig into some of these, and I hope you find this interesting, because I certainly did when I just recently saw this. So I was like, whoa, what the heck? That's the same scene. So here we go.
We got him. He's right below us. I'll climb down and get him.
People start fucking around with the law and all hell breaks loose.
On the surface, both center on these solitary men that are shaped by conflict, who, they subscribe to my channel. It does help my channel out. I'm just about 600 subscribers, so I do enjoy doing these types of videos, and it helps. I've left something out, and you want to aim kind of like entering into town theme. By the time he did First Blood, he was a much, much better musician, and he had these driving themes in First Blood that move the story forward, and they also escalate the drama of it. And of course, if you don't know, Jerry Goldsmith, he's very famous for he made the themes for the Star Trek movies. He did Poltergeist. He did Total Recall. He did the Air Force One. He's got I would say he's in my top 3 greatest composers, top 4 at least. Now let's dig into the specific scenes that I've been referring to. And by the way, if you look at the bullet points of the storyline for each of these, it's the same. There's this scene, there's this scene, and there's this scene, and they line up for both movies. It's noticeable. So we're going to start with of course, love to hear from you. And I hope at the very least, if there's one of these movies that you haven't seen, or both of them, God forbid, you go and you watch them, because they're both just absolutely fantastic movies. I have a top 100 list. I have a top 200 list. Lonely Are the Brave, which is a very recent film that I just saw, it's going in there somewhere. I'm telling you, it's going in there. And I can't wait to watch it a third time and a fourth time. It's a phenomenal movie. So it holds up with the rest of these. And I'm looking forward to, well, I'm not going to be there for it, but I hope you see it. And I hope